Commander Vexnar stood in the observation room of the medical bay, his 4 arms folded across his chest as he watched the human soldier through the reinforced glass. The creature was small by Thalorian standards, barely reaching the height of their youth. Its pale skin was covered in strange patterns of dark ink, and its eyes held a calm that seemed almost unnatural for a prisoner of war. "This is the one who destroyed an entire patrol unit?" Vexnar asked, his voice carrying the clicking undertones of his species. Medical Officer Zyrex nodded, her scales shifting to a deeper blue as she accessed her data tablet. "Yes, Commander. 8 of our soldiers, armed and armored. This human had nothing but a broken blade in its bare hands." Vexnar turned his attention back to the human, Sergeant Elena Cruz, according to the identification they had recovered from her damaged suit. She sat on the edge of the medical bed, her wrists bound by energy restraints that could hold a charging Grox beast. She did not struggle. She did not scream. She simply waited. "Show me the combat footage," Vexnar ordered. Zyrex hesitated. "Commander, I must warn you, what you are about to see is disturbing. I have commanded armies across 3 star systems. I have witnessed horrors that would break lesser minds. Show me." The holographic display flickered to life, and Vexnar watched as the patrol unit approached the crashed human escape pod. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, their weapons raised and ready. They found the human pinned beneath debris, her leg bent at an angle that should have rendered her immobile. Then everything changed. The human looked up at the approaching soldiers and something shifted in her eyes. She reached down and grabbed her own broken leg. The sound that came through the recording made Vexnar's heart skip a beat. The human had reset her own bone. Then she stood. "That is not possible," Vexnar whispered. "Keep watching," Zyrex replied. The human moved like liquid fire. She dodged plasma blasts that should have been too fast to see. She struck with a fury that seemed to multiply her strength tenfold. One soldier went down with a crushed throat. Another lost his weapon arm to a strike that bent his armor inward. The human took 3 direct hits from stun weapons and kept fighting. In the end, she stood alone among the bodies of the patrol unit, covered in their blood and her own, her chest heaving with exhaustion. Then she collapsed. "How?" Vexnar demanded. "Our soldiers are twice her size. They were armed, she was injured. How is she still alive?" "That is what I wanted to show you, Commander." Zyrex pulled up a new display, filled with biological data that made little sense to Vexnar's untrained eyes. When we examined the human, we discovered something remarkable. Her body had flooded itself with a chemical compound. The humans call it adrenaline. Adrenaline. It is a hormone produced by their bodies in times of extreme stress. It increases their heart rate, sharpens their senses, and most importantly, it suppresses their pain response almost entirely. When this human fought our soldiers, she literally could not feel her broken leg. Her body had turned off her ability to recognize damage so that she could continue fighting. Vexnar stared at the data. Their bodies do this automatically, without any external stimulation. "Yes, Commander. And that is not all." Zyrex highlighted another section of the display. "The adrenaline response also grants them temporary increases in strength, speed, and reaction time. Their muscles can perform beyond their normal limits because the body stops protecting itself from damage. Humans call this hysterical strength. There are recorded instances of humans lifting objects that should be physically impossible for their frame, simply because their survival instinct demanded it." Vexnar searched for the right word, "this is terrifying." "I agree, Commander, but it gets worse." Zyrex changed the display again, showing a comparison between Thalorian and human physiology. "Our species evolved on a stable world with few predators. We developed intelligence and technology to survive. Humans evolved on a death world. Their planet is covered in predators, natural disasters, extreme temperature variations, and toxic environments. Every aspect of their biology is designed for survival in conditions that would kill most species in the galaxy. She pointed to a section of the human brain on the display. This is their amygdala. It triggers the adrenaline response when they perceive a threat. But here is the fascinating part, Commander. The human brain can sometimes misidentify threats. It can trigger this response not just for actual danger, but for perceived danger. Humans can become afraid of things that are not real, and their bodies will still flood with adrenaline. They poison themselves with their own fear. In a manner of speaking, but they have also learned to control it. Their warriors train to use this response intentionally. They call it channeling fear. They deliberately put themselves in dangerous situations to trigger the adrenaline, then use its effects to fight harder than they normally could. Vexnar turned back to the observation window. Sergeant Cruz had not moved. She sat perfectly still, her breathing slow and steady. But now he noticed something he had missed before. Her eyes were not calm. They were watchful, waiting. She was a predator in a cage, conserving her energy for the moment when an opportunity would present itself. "What do you recommend?" Vexnar asked. "I recommend we study her," Zyrax said. "If we can understand how this adrenaline works, if we can synthesize it, imagine what it could do for our own soldiers. We could create warriors who feel no pain, who fight with twice their normal strength, who never surrender because their bodies refuse to let them." Vexnar considered this. The war against the human alliance had not gone well. What was supposed to be a quick conquest of a primitive species had turned into a bloody stalemate. Human ships were slower and less advanced, but their crews fought with a ferocity that the Thalorian Empire had never encountered. Now he understood why. "Do it," he said, "but be careful. This human is more dangerous than she appears." Zyrax bowed her head. "Of course, Commander, I will begin the research immediately." As Vexnar left the medical bay, he could not shake the feeling that he was making a terrible mistake. But the war demanded results, and if the humans had a secret weapon hidden in their own blood, the Empire would have it too. Inside the observation room, Sergeant Cruz allowed herself a small smile. They thought she did not understand their language. They thought the translator implant in her ear was broken, but she had heard every word. She knew what they wanted. And she knew that they had no idea what they were getting themselves into. 3 weeks passed. The research station orbited a dead moon in a system far from the front lines of the war. Zyrax had been given everything she needed: equipment, staff, and unlimited access to the human prisoner. She had made significant progress. "The compound is remarkable," she reported to Commander Vexnar during his regular inspection. "Pure adrenaline, when introduced to Thalorian physiology, produces results that exceed our most optimistic projections. Test subjects show a 40% increase in reaction time, a 30% increase in pain tolerance, and a significant boost in aggression. Side effects: minor, elevated heart rate, excessive sweating, some trembling in the extremities. Nothing that would impair combat effectiveness." Vexnar nodded with satisfaction. "When can we begin field trials?" "I would like more time to refine the dosage, Commander. The human body produces adrenaline in precise amounts, regulated by complex systems we do not fully understand. Too little and the effects are negligible. Too much and—" She hesitated. "And what?" "The test subjects become difficult to control. The aggression increase is not selective. They attack everything, friend and foe alike." "Then find the correct dosage. I want combat-ready soldiers within the month." Zyrax bowed. "As you command." After Vexnar left, Zyrax returned to her laboratory. The human was strapped to an examination table, sensors attached to every part of her body. She had been remarkably cooperative during the testing, almost as if she wanted them to understand how her biology worked. "You are smiling," Zyrax observed. "Why?" Sergeant Cruz looked at the alien scientist with an expression that might have been amusement. Because you still do not understand. Zyrax paused. The human's pronunciation of the Thalorian language was rough but comprehensible. You speak our tongue. I have been listening for 3 weeks. Your language is not as difficult as you believe. This was concerning. Zyrax quickly reviewed the conversations that had taken place in the human's presence. What do we not understand? Adrenaline is not a drug, Cruz said. It is a response. You cannot separate it from everything else that makes it work. You cannot put it in a bottle and expect the same results. Our tests indicate otherwise. Your tests are incomplete. The human shifted on the table, testing her restraints almost casually. Adrenaline is part of a system. Fear triggers it, training controls it, experience shapes it. Your soldiers have none of these things. You are giving them raw power with no knowledge of how to use it. Zyrax considered this. Then we will train them. You cannot train for fear. You cannot teach someone how to die. Your people have never known true predators. You have never been prey. Fear is something you experience. It is not something you learn from a book. You speak as if you are trying to help us. Cruz laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. I am trying to help you. I am trying to help you understand why this is a terrible idea, but you will not listen. Your kind never does. You see something powerful and you want it without understanding the cost. What cost? Adrenaline does not come for free. Every time a human uses it, we burn a piece of ourselves. Our hearts work harder. Our muscles tear. Our minds carry the weight of every fight we survive. We do not fear death because we have accepted that every battle brings us closer to it. Can your soldiers say the same? Zyrax had no answer. Your soldiers will take this drug you are making, Cruz continued. They will feel powerful. They will feel invincible. And then they will learn what every human learns the first time they truly fight for their lives. Power means nothing if you do not know how to control it. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is the teacher. Without it, you are just a beast waiting to be put down. The scientist recorded these observations but did not change her plans. The commander wanted results. The war demanded them. Whatever warnings the human offered, they would not stop the project. But late at night, when the laboratory was empty and quiet, Zyrax found herself thinking about the human's words, and wondering if perhaps, just perhaps, they should have listened. The first field test took place on a contested border world. A squad of 12 Thalorian soldiers, each injected with the synthesized combat drug, was deployed against a fortified human position. The engagement was recorded for analysis. At first, everything went according to plan. The enhanced soldiers moved faster than any Thalorian troops before them. They shrugged off wounds that should have dropped them. They fought with a savagery that matched the humans shot for shot. Then it all went wrong. The squad leader took a plasma round to the shoulder. Instead of retreating for medical attention, he charged forward with a scream that the recording equipment barely captured. He reached the human position and killed 3 enemy soldiers before his own troops arrived to support him. And then he turned on them. The berserker rage that consumed him did not distinguish between friend and enemy. He attacked the nearest moving target, which happened to be his own second in command. By the time the other enhanced soldiers subdued him, 2 more Thalorians were dead. The mission was technically a success. The human position was taken, but the cost was far higher than anyone had anticipated. Zyrax reviewed the footage in her laboratory, the human prisoner watching silently from her containment cell. The dosage was correct, Zyrax muttered. The enhancement performed as expected. Why did he lose control? Because you gave him power without teaching him how to suffer, Cruz said. Zyrax turned to face the human. Explain. Your squad leader was wounded, in pain, afraid. His body was flooded with adrenaline, both natural and synthetic, but he had never experienced true fear before. He did not know how to process it, so his mind broke. Humans do not break. Humans break all the time, but we know what breaking feels like. We have experienced it before, in training, in childhood, in every moment of our lives when we faced something bigger and stronger than ourselves. We learn to put ourselves back together. Your soldiers have never learned that lesson. Xyrax sat down heavily. Then the project is a failure. No, the project is a success. You have created exactly what you wanted to create. You just did not understand what you were asking for. Cruz leaned forward, her eyes intense. Adrenaline is not a weapon. It is a survival mechanism. It exists to help us escape from things that want to kill us. You have taken that mechanism and turned it into a hammer, but a hammer cannot think. A hammer cannot choose. A hammer can only destroy. What would you suggest? It was the first time Xyrax had asked the human for advice. Cruz seemed surprised by the question. I would suggest you stop trying to become us, she said finally. You are not humans. You are not forged in the same fires. Find your own strength instead of trying to steal ours. Our strength is not enough. We are losing the war. Then perhaps you should ask yourselves why. Before Xyrax could respond, alarms began to blare throughout the station. Red lights flashed. The automated voice announced a hull breach in Sector 7. What is happening? Xyrax demanded, accessing her console. Human ships, the station's AI reported. 3 cruisers have dropped out of hyperspace. They are launching boarding pods. Cruz smiled again, that terrible, knowing smile. It took them longer than I expected. I was beginning to worry. Xyrax stared at the human. You knew this would happen. I knew they would come for me. I am valuable. I am experienced. And most importantly, I know exactly what your project was developing. Cruz stood up, her restraints falling away. She held up a small device, clearly stolen from the laboratory. Your security is not as good as you think. Guards, Xyrax shouted into her communicator. There was no response. They are busy, Cruz said. Your enhanced soldiers are having another episode. It seems the stress of an unexpected attack triggered their adrenaline response. Without proper control, they are. Well, you saw the footage. The sounds of combat echoed through the station. Screams, explosions, the unmistakable roar of Thalorian soldiers lost to their own artificial rage. Cruz walked toward the door. You wanted to understand human adrenaline. Let me show you something your tests could never capture. She turned to face Xyrax, and the scientist saw something change in the human's eyes. The calm evaporated, replaced by something primal and fierce. Cruz's muscles tensed. Her breathing quickened. Her pupils dilated until her eyes seemed almost black. This is what adrenaline looks like when it is controlled, Cruz said. This is what it looks like when fear becomes a tool instead of a prison. And then she was gone, moving through the station with a speed and grace that Xyrax could barely follow on the security cameras. The human did not attack randomly. She did not lose herself to rage. Every movement was precise, calculated, deadly. Xyrax watched as Cruz neutralized guard after guard, always using exactly the amount of force necessary. She watched as the human reached the docking bay just as the boarding pods arrived. She watched as Cruz was reunited with her fellow soldiers, embracing them briefly before they began their real mission. Extracting her had never been the only objective. The human forces moved through the station, downloading research data, planting explosives, systematically destroying everything the Thalorian Empire had learned about adrenaline. Xyrax did not try to stop them. She simply watched and recorded, knowing that this footage would be more valuable than any drug could ever be. The humans did not fight like beasts. They fought like a storm, focused and relentless and utterly devastating. And when they left, the station was a broken shell, its secrets scattered into the void. In the ruins of her laboratory, Xyrax found a message waiting on her console. It was from Cruz. You wanted to understand us. Here is your lesson. Adrenaline is not what makes humans dangerous. It is what happens after the adrenaline fades. We pick ourselves up. We learn. We adapt. We come back stronger, Can your empire say the same? Think carefully before you answer, because we will be watching. Zyrax read the message 3 times. Then she began to write her report, knowing that it would change nothing. The Empire would continue to pursue the combat drug project. They would continue to fail. And somewhere out there, the humans would continue to fight, powered by something far more powerful than any chemical compound. They would fight with the knowledge that they were the children of a death world, survivors of 1 billion years of evolution, tempered by fear and forged by pain. And they would never, ever surrender. The War Council chamber fell silent as Zyrax finished her presentation. 6 admirals, 12 generals, and Commander Vexnar himself stared at the holographic display showing the destroyed research station. The footage of Cruz's escape played on loop, a constant reminder of their failure. "You are suggesting we abandon the project entirely," Admiral Threx demanded, his voice sharp with disbelief. "After the resources we have invested." "I am suggesting that the project has fundamental flaws that cannot be corrected," Zyrax replied. "Human adrenaline is not a simple chemical enhancement. It is part of an integrated system that evolved over billions of years. We cannot replicate that system in a laboratory." Yet the enhanced soldiers showed remarkable improvement in combat performance. They also showed a complete inability to maintain discipline under pressure. 3 more incidents have occurred since the station was attacked. In each case, enhanced soldiers turned on their own units when combat stress exceeded their psychological limits. Vexnar raised a hand, silencing the argument. "What are the human casualties?" Zyrax hesitated. "In the 3 incidents combined, our enhanced soldiers killed 47 enemy combatants. And our own losses: 23 Thalorian soldiers killed by friendly fire, an additional 31 wounded." The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. Nearly half of the casualties were self-inflicted. No commander could accept those odds. "There must be a solution," General Crick said. "Perhaps longer training periods, better psychological screening, modified dosages." "I have considered all of these options," Zyrax said. "None of them address the core problem. Our soldiers lack the evolutionary adaptation that allows humans to control their fear response. You cannot train someone to experience something their species has never known." "Then perhaps we need human trainers," another voice suggested. Everyone turned to look at Subcommander Yeth, a young officer who had remained silent throughout the meeting. "If the problem is psychological, then we need psychological solutions. Humans have mastered their adrenaline response. Perhaps they can teach us to master ours." "You suggest we ask our enemies for help," Threx scoffed. "I suggest we find another way to obtain what we need. Not every human is loyal to the Alliance. There are mercenaries, outcasts, prisoners who might be willing to share their knowledge in exchange for compensation." Vexnar considered this. An interesting proposal, but it assumes that human psychology can be taught to non-humans. Zyrax, is this possible? "I do not know," Zyrax admitted. "The human I studied suggested that our species fundamentally lacks certain experiences necessary for adrenaline control, but I am not certain her assessment was correct. She had obvious reasons to discourage our research." "Then we will test the theory." Vexnar stood, signaling the end of the formal discussion. "Find me a human willing to train our soldiers. Offer whatever compensation is necessary. If this approach fails as well, we will abandon the project and focus our resources elsewhere." The council dispersed, each member returning to their duties with varying degrees of satisfaction. Zyrax remained behind, staring at the frozen image of Cruz on the display. "You disagree with my decision?" Vexnar asked. "I am uncertain, Commander. The human prisoner warned us that this path would lead to disaster. She was correct about everything else. I wonder if she is correct about this as well." "Perhaps she is, but we cannot afford to surrender an advantage simply because the path to obtaining it is difficult. Vexnar moved to stand beside her, his forearms clasped behind his back. The war is not going well. Human forces have pushed us back on 3 fronts. Their ships are inferior, their numbers are smaller, but their soldiers fight with a ferocity we cannot match. If adrenaline is the source of that ferocity, we must find a way to obtain it. And if we cannot, then we will lose this war. And I do not intend to be the commander who presided over the fall of the Thalorian Empire. Zyrax bowed her head in acknowledgement. She understood the pressure Vexnar faced. The Empire had never lost a war. The concept of defeat was almost inconceivable to most Thalorians, but she had spent weeks studying human biology, human psychology, human history. She knew things that Vexnar did not. Humans had lost wars, many wars. They had experienced defeat, occupation, and near extinction multiple times throughout their history, and each time they had come back stronger. They did not fear loss because they knew how to recover from it. They did not fear death because they had stared into its face 1,000 times and chosen to keep fighting anyway. The Thalorian Empire feared defeat precisely because they had never experienced it. When it finally came, and Zyrax was increasingly certain that it would come, the psychological impact would be devastating. But she kept these thoughts to herself. Some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. 6 months later, a human mercenary named Jack Morrison arrived at the Thalorian military training facility on the planet Veth Prime. He was an older man, his hair gray and his face marked by scars that spoke of decades of combat. His eyes held the same watchful intensity that Zyrax remembered from her time with Cruz. "You understand what we are asking," Vexnar said during their first meeting. "You want me to teach your soldiers how to fight like humans." Morrison's voice was rough, like stone grinding against stone. "Specifically, you want me to teach them how to control their fear response so that they can use your combat drug without going crazy." "That is correct. And you are offering me 10 million credits, a full pardon for all crimes against the Empire, and a private estate on a neutral world." "Also correct." Morrison laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You must be desperate." "We are practical. If you can deliver what we need, the compensation is fair." "Fair?" Morrison shook his head. "Nothing about this is fair, Commander. You want to turn your soldiers into something they were never meant to be. That is not fair to them, and it is not fair to whatever poor bastards they end up fighting." "Then you refuse." "I did not say that." Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying Vexnar with an expression that reminded the commander uncomfortably of Cruz. "I am saying that you need to understand what you are asking for. You want your soldiers to experience fear, real fear, the kind that breaks men, the kind that turns warriors into weeping children. Are you prepared for that?" "If it is necessary." "It is necessary. Fear is not something you can fake. Your soldiers need to believe, truly believe, that they are going to die. They need to face that belief and choose to keep fighting anyway. That is what adrenaline control is. It is not suppressing fear. It is embracing it." Vexnar considered this. "How would you accomplish this?" "By making them afraid of me." Morrison smiled, and for a moment Vexnar glimpsed the predator lurking beneath the mercenary's casual exterior. "I am going to put your soldiers through hell. I am going to break them down and rebuild them. By the time I am finished, they will not be Thalorians anymore. They will be something new, something that can fight alongside humans or against them without flinching. And if some of them do not survive the training, then they would not have survived real combat either. Better to find out now than on the battlefield." Vexnar did not like this human. He did not trust him, but he needed him, and they both knew it. "Very well. You have full authority over the training program. I will assign Zyrax to assist with medical monitoring. Report directly to me." Morrison stood and offered a human gesture that Vexnar recognized as a salute. "You will not regret this, Commander. Or maybe you will. Either way, it is going to be interesting. As the human left, Zyrax approached from where she had been observing. I do not like him. Neither do I, but can he deliver what he promises? I do not know, he seems dangerous in a way that Cruz was not. Cruz was a soldier, this one is something else. Yes, Zyrax agreed, that is what concerns me. Morrison's training program began the next day. He selected 50 volunteers from the elite Special Forces units, soldiers who had already proven themselves in combat. He told them nothing about what to expect. The first exercise was simple. The soldiers were dropped onto an uninhabited world with minimal supplies and told to survive for 1 week. What Morrison did not tell them was that he had also released several predator species onto the planet, animals that had evolved to hunt and kill creatures far more dangerous than Thalorians. 12 soldiers died in the first 3 days. The survivors formed into groups, building shelters and establishing defensive perimeters. They learned to sleep in shifts, to move silently, to trust their instincts over their technology. On the 4th day, Morrison began hunting them himself. He moved through the forest like a ghost, striking without warning and disappearing before anyone could respond. He did not kill his targets. He wounded them, disabled them, left them helpless for their companions to find. The psychological impact was devastating. By the end of the week, only 23 soldiers remained. They were exhausted, terrified, and broken. Morrison gathered them together and looked at each one carefully. "Congratulations," he said. "You have survived the easy part." One of the soldiers, a young officer named Tharvan, stood on shaking legs. "Easy. We lost half our number. We were hunted like animals." "Yes, and now you know what it feels like to be prey." Morrison met Tharvan's eyes without flinching. Every human child learns this lesson before they can walk. Danger is everywhere. Death is always close. The universe does not care whether you live or die. Your survival depends entirely on your own strength, your own will, your own refusal to surrender. That is madness. That is reality. The Thalorian Empire has protected you from this reality for your entire lives. You have never known true fear because you have never been truly helpless. Now you have. And now, for the first time, you can learn to control it. Tharvan said nothing, but something had changed in his eyes. The fear was still there, but it was different now. Focused, controlled. Morrison smiled. "Good, you are beginning to understand. Tomorrow we begin the real training." Zyrax watched the exchange from her monitoring station. She had seen countless hours of combat footage during her research, but nothing had prepared her for watching Morrison work. He was not just training soldiers. He was reshaping their fundamental understanding of existence. And she was beginning to suspect that this was exactly what the humans had intended all along. The war was not just about territory or resources. It was about survival. And the humans were teaching the Thalorians a lesson that would change them forever, whether they won or lost. The only question was whether the Thalorians would survive long enough to learn it. 3 years passed. The war continued, but something had changed on both sides. The Thalorian soldiers who completed Morrison's training program were different. Not just better fighters, but fundamentally transformed as individuals. They understood fear. They respected it, and they used it as a weapon. The adrenaline combat drug was eventually perfected, but not in the way anyone had expected. The key was not the chemical compound itself, but the psychological preparation that allowed soldiers to process its effects. Morrison's training provided that preparation, turning raw power into controlled devastation. But there was an unexpected consequence. The trained Thalorians began to see humans differently. They had experienced the same crucible of fear that shaped human psychology. They had learned the same lessons about survival and perseverance. When they faced human soldiers in combat, they no longer saw monsters. They saw themselves. And humans, in turn, recognized the change. Commander Elena Cruz, now leading a special operations unit on the front lines, first noticed it during a contested engagement on a border world. The Thalorian soldiers facing her did not fight with the mindless ferocity of drugged berserkers. They fought with discipline, with precision, with the kind of controlled aggression that she had only seen in human veterans. She captured one of them during a brief skirmish and questioned him personally. "You are different," she said. "Who trained you?" The Thalorian, whose name was Tharvan, met her eyes without fear. "A human, a mercenary named Morrison." Cruz went very still. "Jack Morrison, old man, gray hair, voice like gravel." "Yes. I know him. He was my instructor 15 years ago." Cruz sat down heavily. "I should have known. That old bastard could never resist a challenge." "He spoke of you," Tharvan said. "He said you were the best student he ever had. He said that if anyone could defeat what we were becoming, it would be you." "What are you becoming?" "Something new, something that is neither Thalorian nor human, something that combines the best of both." Tharvan smiled, a gesture that looked strange on his alien face but carried genuine emotion. "Your people taught us fear, but in doing so you taught us something else as well. You taught us that fear does not have to mean weakness. It can mean strength. It can mean growth. It can mean change." Cruz considered this. The war had taken millions of lives on both sides. The Thalorian Empire was no closer to victory than when it started, but neither was the human alliance. They had reached a stalemate that could last for generations, each side too evenly matched to defeat the other. Unless something changed. "What if there was another way?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "What if instead of fighting each other, we learned from each other? What if the transformation your soldiers are undergoing was not a weapon, but a bridge?" Tharvan was silent for a long moment. "You would make peace with the Empire." "I would explore the possibility, if your commanders were willing." "I do not know if they are, but I know that many soldiers on both sides are tired of this war. We have learned to respect each other. Perhaps that is the first step toward something greater." Cruz made a decision. "I am going to release you. I am going to send you back to your commanders with a message. Tell them that the human alliance is willing to discuss terms. Not surrender, not victory, just talking." "They will be suspicious." "Of course they will. But you are living proof that our species can change, that we can grow beyond our limitations. If enough people see that proof, maybe things can be different." Tharvan stood as his restraints were removed. "You are taking a great risk." "Humans are good at risk. It is part of our adrenaline response." Cruz smiled, and for a moment they were just two warriors sharing a joke. "Go, deliver my message, and maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to end this war without destroying each other." Tharvan left. Cruz watched him go, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step toward something extraordinary. Either way, she had done something that neither side had expected. She had offered trust. And in a universe shaped by fear and survival, trust was perhaps the most powerful weapon of all. The peace talks began 6 months later, held on a neutral station in unclaimed space. Representatives from both sides met face to face for the first time, sitting across a table that seemed far too small to bridge the gulf between their civilizations. Commander Vexnar represented the Thalorian Empire. Commander Elena Cruz represented the Human Alliance. Between them sat Jack Morrison, whose role in training both sides gave him a unique perspective on what was possible. "This is unprecedented," Vexnar said. "Our peoples have been at war for a decade. Many believe that peace is impossible." "Many believe that fear cannot be controlled," Cruz replied. "We proved them wrong. Perhaps we can prove them wrong again." The negotiations were difficult. Years of conflict had created wounds that would take generations to heal, but something had shifted in the relationship between humans and Thalorians. The soldiers who had faced each other in combat, who had experienced the same training and the same transformations, saw things differently. They advocated for peace with a passion that surprised their political leaders. In the end, a treaty was signed. Not a perfect peace, but a beginning. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, joint military exercises where humans and Thalorians learned to fight alongside each other instead of against each other. Xyrax attended the signing ceremony as a guest of honor. Her research on human adrenaline had started everything, even if it had led somewhere no one expected. "You look thoughtful," Morrison said, joining her at the observation window. Outside, ships from both civilizations hung in space, their weapons powered down for the first time in years. "I was remembering something Cruz said when she was my prisoner," Xyrax replied. "She said that we did not understand what we were asking for when we tried to replicate human adrenaline. She was right. She usually is, annoying habit of hers. But she was also wrong about one thing." Xyrax turned to face the old human warrior. "She said we could not become like you. She said we lacked the evolutionary foundation. She was wrong. We could not become human, but we could become something new, something that learned from humans instead of simply copying them." Morrison nodded slowly. "That is the thing about evolution. It does not repeat. It builds on what came before. Your species is different now than it was 10 years ago. So is mine. Maybe that is the real lesson. Not that humans are special, but that everyone can change if they face the right challenges." Fear as a teacher. Fear as a tool, a motivation, a catalyst. Morrison smiled, and for once it was not a threatening expression. "Your people wanted combat drugs. You got something better. You got perspective." Below them, on the station's main deck, Cruz and Vexnar were shaking hands while cameras recorded the moment for history. It was a small gesture, but it represented something enormous. Two species that had tried to destroy each other had found a way to coexist. And it had all started because someone asked the wrong question. The Thalorians had wanted to know how humans were so strong. They had focused on the physical, the chemical, the measurable. But human strength had never been about adrenaline or hormones or muscle density. It was about something far more fundamental. It was about the willingness to face fear and keep going anyway. It was about the knowledge that survival was not guaranteed, that the universe was dangerous and indifferent, and that the only way to overcome those odds was to never, ever give up. The Thalorians had learned that lesson, and in learning it, they had become something more than they were before. Not human. Something new. And in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations and countless species, perhaps that was the greatest gift humanity could offer. Not their technology or their tactics or their physical abilities, but their perspective on what it meant to be alive in a universe that was trying to kill you. The perspective that said, "We are not afraid because we have already faced our fear and chosen to fight anyway." The perspective that said, "We are not weak because weakness is just another challenge to overcome." The perspective that said, "Humanity, fuck yeah." And now, for the first time, another species could say it too. Thalorians, fuck yeah. Together, they would face whatever challenges the universe threw at them, not as enemies, but as allies. Not as predator and prey, but as partners. And that, more than any combat drug or training program, was the true legacy of human adrenaline. The legacy of fear transformed into strength. The legacy of enemies transformed into friends. The legacy of war transformed into peace. It was, perhaps, the most human thing of all.